All right, I just tweeted it out again. We should be ready to start here in a second. All right, we got some people coming in. All right. All right, what's going on, everybody? Keith Niebuhr joined by Nick Torre. We're both with Gators Online. This is Talking Gators. We're going to break down yesterday's not so great loss in Jacksonville to number 1 Georgia, and then address, where does Florida go from here? What's next on the horizon? How they can finish with a winning record and get to a bowl game and all that sort of good stuff. But Nick, first of all, 43-20 yesterday in Jacksonville. By the midpoint of the second quarter on, it really wasn't overly competitive. Georgia had taken complete control of the game. Were there any bright spots for Florida? Let's try to start with something positive if we can. First, obviously, Eugene Wilson. What comes to mind, Nick? What can they build off of this kind of a humbling loss, quite frankly?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is how I saw the game going. I wrote my thoughts like this game wasn't lost on the 4th down and 1 call. It wasn't lost on a block punt. It's been lost every offseason over the last 7 years when Florida was not recruiting and Georgia was recruiting at an elite level. The game was lost on the lines of scrimmage. And twice this week I previewed how different the talent levels have been in recruiting for Georgia and for Florida on the lines of scrimmage. And I mean, Carson Beck was protected better than a newborn baby in a hospital. Florida got a couple pressures, I think 3, but just not able to get to him, not able to affect the passer. And inversely, Graham Mertz was sacked 4 times, fumbled the ball twice on those sacks, lost one of them. This is just a way better roster at Georgia. And I think maybe you get lost in beating South Carolina and getting a road win, but like Florida was not supposed to beat Georgia. So positive notes for me are Eugene Wilson's really good. He's going to be a problem for opposing defensive coordinators. And then the other positives for me are you get a taste of, those freshmen, those sophomores, redshirt freshmen that you're going to have to depend on next year. They get a taste of Florida, Georgia. They get to see what the stadium looks like. I think other than looking to the future, there's no positives from the game. Billy Napier said, we don't give him, us in the media don't give him any sympathy. And certainly none of the coaches in the SEC are going to give him any sympathy. So if you want to just look at the game, I don't know, outside of the running backs being able to get going a little bit, and Eugene Wilson having a freshman record 11 receptions. Other than that, there's aren't positives to take away from the actual game.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Florida had a fairly productive first quarter on offense, did nothing for 2 quarters on offense, and then got a lot of what I call those hollow yards late. So I know people said, hey, they didn't quit. No, they're paid not to quit. I mean, that's
they are paid now. Yeah.
I can't just on a weekday, or anybody listening or watching, you can't just say, hey, it's Wednesday, things aren't going well. I think I'll just call it quits the rest of the week. Maybe. And you don't get rewarded for showing up to work on Thursday and showing up on Friday. There was a real lack of emotion, I have to say, when they looked a little shell-shocked when Georgia went on that run, Nick. I'm not going to lie. You're at the game. I was watching it from TV, and there was a flat offense there. They were just kind of down and out. But anyway, first drive, Florida goes right down the field, Nick. And I know you say that there wasn't one play. Look, over the course of the game, Georgia was probably going to wear them out no matter what. Better men across the board. You look at the Florida roster, Nick, and you don't find too many guys that would start for Georgia. However, it was 7-3, and Florida was driving, was at midfield, and we saw that first trick play that resulted in a 2-yard loss, the double reverse, seemed to be sort of a momentum killer. Now, I'm not one to really question play calling. They had up to that point, they had a great game plan. However, normally you don't have to go into your bag of tricks until you really need it. But at that point, Georgia, Nick, hadn't shown any ability to stop or even slow Florida. So I thought that was an interesting call. Now, in a game like that where you're outmanned, you're going to pull out all the stops. And that would also be so that what I'm saying is, you didn't need to at that point, but that also might be kind of the reason that Billy Napier felt that's why he needed to do it. That, hey, they're reeling, the Georgia defense is on their heels. Let's get them here while we have a chance. But it didn't work. And then also there was that play at the end of the first quarter, Nick, where was it Khalil Jackson caught that pass? Boy, it looked like a first down. They called it a first down. Mm-hmm. You go to the second quarter, they review it, they overturn that call, say it's fourth and inches, and then Florida goes into the bag of tricks again, and that didn't work, gifting Georgia the ball. I think at the 31 of Florida, they scored a few plays later. The next series, Graham Mertz fumbled, Georgia scores again, and it's over. It was over like that. I haven't seen a game. I mean, you don't see too many games where it's over like that, Nick. So even though Georgia was the better team, Florida did have a chance to really hang around for a while and didn't take advantage of those opportunities. They needed to play a perfect game. They didn't, Nick. But they could have taken it into the second half, though. They didn't even do that.
Well, they didn't do it last year either. Talking to people inside the building, the message to the team was our good is good enough. Our best is good enough. I said all week, the last 2 weeks, and apologies for the bye week for all you guys. You just had to hear me talk about how good Georgia was for 2 weeks.
Yeah, they didn't love that, Nick. I
should have started talking about Arkansas, around Wednesday, Keith. Should have switched it up.
I got news for everybody. Nick doesn't enjoy that. It's not fun, but the reality was the reality. Continue, Mr. Delatorre.
Yeah. The message to the team all week was our good's good enough. Our best is good enough. If we play sound football, if we don't shoot ourselves in the foot, if we execute the game plan and listen, guys, we've given you a great game plan. If we execute this, we'll beat Georgia. And nobody believes it, but the guys here, the guys in the room. Billy's play calling, and you need players to believe that, because I thought and I said Florida has to play a damn near perfect game of football, no mistakes, and hope that Georgia also makes mistakes. Because if Florida plays their A+ game and Georgia plays a B+, Georgia probably wins. That's just where the rosters are. So the message inside the football offices, inside the locker room, was our good's good enough. When you start calling those kind of trick plays, and listen, I have no problem. Billy's 100% right. When he says they think you're a genius when they work and you're an idiot when they don't, 100%. Like I like the play call on 4th and 1. I also love the Philadelphia Eagles, brotherly shove play. Hey, listen, if it's 4th and inches, give me nine linemen, or give me 8 people on the line and a fullback and a running back, and just run up the middle. But it's an RPO. That play could hit. But what he's doing by those play calls are saying, listen, we are in a run situation. And if Georgia knows we're running and we just run into it, we don't have the guys to match up hat for hat against Georgia. So we have to do something else. And I think him trying to manufacture plays and points and momentum shows that they knew, hey, listen, our rosters aren't the same. We're going to have to manufacture some stuff here.
Oh, I get that. I just felt like, at 7-3, they hadn't shown the ability to stop you yet. You'd gone right down the field the first time. So, look, I mean, everything's always open to criticism and critique. Any things we do, things people watching do at work. This isn't like I'm taking shots at anyone. But anyway, hey, Nick, a lot of times you can't tell a lot from statistics. What did Steve Spurrier always say? It was one of my favorite quotes. Can't even get that out. Statistics are for assistant coaches and losers. But you look at yesterday's statistics: first downs, Georgia 23-16, and Florida had a bunch of them in the fourth quarter. Third down efficiency, Georgia 6-12, and a lot of those were when it counted. Florida 4 of 11. Fourth down, Georgia 1 for 1, Florida 0 for 2. Total yards, 486 to 339. And again, a lot of those yards for Florida came when the game was out of reach. Passing 315 for Georgia. Carson Beck, Jacksonville guy, was on fire the whole game. 230 for Florida. Beck was 19 of 28. Mertz was, I believe, 25. I got to look up his numbers. Graham Mertz was 25 of 34 for 230 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, Graham Mertz didn't make any epic mistakes. The fumble was bad. Those happen. That was a protection issue, and the guy hit the ball out of his hand. I mean, what are you going to do when you're getting swarmed? Yards per pass, though, Nick, this is a big one. 11.3 yards for Georgia, 6.8 for Florida. That says a lot. Florida had to go horizontal a lot. Georgia went vertical a lot. Turnovers, 1 for Florida, none for Georgia. How about this? Penalties? Georgia 2 for 10, Florida 2 for 17. So that sort of negated each other, although there were a few plays that I think Florida fans were complaining about that they thought should have gone Florida's way. Rushing, 171 yards for Georgia, Florida 109 yards. Time of possession, 33 minutes, 29 seconds for Georgia, 26 minutes, 31 seconds for Florida. Nick, no matter how you slice it, I mean, every single one of those stats, you put a check mark next to Georgia. They're just a better team. And again, I ask you, we talked about this earlier. How many guys for Florida? I'm not making excuses for a coaching staff, but let's talk in the reality, the real world here. How many guys for Florida would start for this Georgia team? Not that many, right? Would you think?
I think Florida has an advantage at quarterback and running back, but I don't know that Georgia's coaching staff would take Graham Mertz right now over Carson Beck. I just think like on Saturday, hey, I think Graham Mertz watching them. I think Graham Mertz is better than Carson Beck. I don't know that Carson Beck is great. It's really easy to play quarterback behind that offensive line and with those kind of guys. And listen, I think Graham Mertz would look great being Georgia's quarterback because he would have a great supporting cast. Yeah. So I did not come away super impressed with Carson Beck. I think Graham Mertz might be better this season. He has a lot more experience than Carson Beck. And I know Georgia's running backs in the past have been great. They've dealt with a bunch of injuries this year back there. But I would probably take Montrell and Trevor over some of their guys. Trevor absolutely has to learn how to pass block. One of the sacks, just a blitzing linebacker comes in, completely blows him up, and then hits Graham immediately after. That's why he's not on the field more. He can't be trusted to block when it's a passing play.
We got one question. Well, we got a bunch of questions, but this one, can you guys talk about Mark Hockey? That's the strength and conditioning, head of strength and conditioning at the University of Florida. I know some of the players have expressed they aren't fans. I haven't seen any of them express that.
I mean, this is just pulling up something from right when he got here. You're around the strength coach more than you are your position coach. The strength coach is essentially the head coach of the team in the offseason. So the players loved Nick Savage, and Nick Savage stayed for a little bit. He was going to end. He got offered a job essentially to work under or on Mark Hockey's staff. He chose not to, and he went to Ole Miss. So like players were pissed because the guy that they loved, Nick Savage, because you spent, like I said, you spend more time with your strength coach than anyone else, was leaving. Now that has changed. The players like Mark Hockey. I think we've seen a bunch of shoulder injuries this year, and I think Coach and Hockey and his coaching staff will have to figure out, hey, that's a soft tissue injury. What are we doing? How can we strengthen those small ligaments? Listen, at the end of the day, Keith, we're talking about football. You're slamming your shoulder into other big, strong men who are all running full speed. So no, there's no unrest in the locker room right now about Mark Hockey.
Nick, most discouraging thing for you, you're kind of our Mr. Opinion guy at Gators Online. Look, it's a humbling loss. I mean, Georgia scored 43 points. That's the most points Florida's given up to Georgia since 1982, when Florida lost 44-0 in Jacksonville. I believe that was Herschel Walker's last team. It's been a while. But of all the discouraging things, you pointed out some. Look, the recruiting, it's been consistently better at Georgia for close to a decade now, and that adds up. But the most discouraging thing for Florida would be what coming out of that game?
I'm pulling up in my The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, which I wrote from Everbank Field last night. To me, it's the defense, and I don't think that Georgia's offense is like super explosive. Like I think Missouri is going to challenge you more than Georgia will. LSU certainly is going to challenge you more. Like when I read these numbers and I look at these numbers, now I'm very concerned about Florida going to Death Valley. at home, Florida's defense is good. Total defense, they give up 263 a game, 11 points, only 72 on the ground and 187 through the air. Away from Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, Florida's giving up over 404 yards a game, allowing almost 35 points a game, giving up 189 and a quarter yards on the ground a game, and allowing 215 yards a ground on the game. They say elite defenses travel. Great defenses travel. Florida's doesn't go down the road to play at Midtown, Keith. Like, this is really bad. And when you look at what you're going to have to do, Arkansas's at home, FSU's at home, you're going to have to go to Death Valley with a Heisman contending, probably at this point of the year, Heisman favorite in Jaden Daniels, who is putting up video game numbers on easy mode. And Brady Cook in Missouri, that's been a great offense. Eli Drinkwitz removed himself from play calling. They got in an offensive coordinator, play caller. They've been cooking teams this year. So for me, the most discouraging thing was Florida's defense. Now I'm seeing a pattern. We kind of talked it away in Utah. It was one big play and then a short field drive. Other than that, they were good. But hey, maybe Utah just threw on the emergency brake and pointed the car downhill and just let it roll.
There's no maybe. I thought that I mentioned that the day after. That doesn't mean the Florida defense didn't play well in the second half of that game. But if you're Utah and the other team can't move the ball, the only way you can really lose that game is by putting it up in the air and turning it over and just doing ridiculously stupid things. So they decided they weren't going to do that. But so Florida now, Nick, has played 4 pretty solid teams. Yeah, Utah, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Georgia. And they were non-competitive in 3 of them.
Yeah, I thought Tennessee stinks. I thought Tennessee stunk, but look, I look up and they're 5-2. Their only SEC losses to Florida at Florida, and that was an incredible.
Well, no, they lost to Bama at Bama, but led 20-7. They led 20-7 at the half before they had an even worse meltdown in Tuscaloosa than they did in the first half against Florida. But so that and the common thread there is that those 3 losses, again, non-competitive in all 3, were away from the swamp. So they've got to kind of figure that out. And you just beat South Carolina. I think everybody was feeling pretty good about things, and South Carolina might win 3 games. A win's a win on the road. Don't get me wrong. I mean, look, there's nothing to be. She's never apologized for winning, and that was a big moment for them. But the reality at the end of the day was maybe we all bought into that win a little too much. All of us. I think everybody. I mean, I still picked Georgia to win by 10 or 11, and I think you did too. But I think we were thinking that that these guys are maybe ready to take that next step. And here's the one thing, and we brought this up last week, Nick. We knew the one thing, that Georgia was not going to take Florida lightly. You know why Florida never upsets anyone, really? Even when they win 5 games, they still got a giant bullseye on their back. It's the University of Florida. Nobody goes into that game taking Florida lightly. So they don't really catch too many people napping. And that's a product of past success. But, they just weren't really outmatched entirely across the board. Yes, I actually would take Georgia's running backs too, quite frankly. But look, so now, Nick, the question is they're 5-3, about where everybody thought they'd be anyway. The biggest question is, in fact, actually, some people didn't think they'd get the 5 wins. But the fact that they were non-competitive in those games, then you look who's you got coming up. Arkansas at home. Well, they've got 2 wins, but most of their losses are within a very close margin. They lost to LSU by 3 on the road. They lost to Ole Miss by 7 on the road. They lost to Alabama by 3 on the road. Okay. Now they just fired their offensive coordinator, but they had last week off. They had time to get healthy, get rested, get ready while Florida was out there getting pummeled and pushed into the dirt every other play. Georgia,
your offense is probably better with Dan Enos not in the building anymore.
Yeah. And so here's the thing, one other thing about that game, Georgia, despite having all that talent, sure looked like they played harder. They play hard. They gang tackle. They don't get pushed forward on tackles. They push backwards. So they got a lot of things working in their favor. So Florida's got a big chance. So even Arkansas, the game that we all think is this gimme because they got 2 wins, when you dig deeper into it, yes, it's at home, a noon game, the Jersey blackout, Military Appreciation Day. It's going to be a fun time at the Swamp, but that's no gimme. Then you got LSU on the road. LSU's averaging number one nationally in scoring offense at 47 points a game.
They're
at
fun
Missouri.
to watch.
At Missouri. Now, the thing I'll say about Missouri has to play Georgia and Tennessee in back-to-back weeks before that game. They're hitting the meat of their schedule now. I think so. They're about to have maybe a little bit of a wake-up call themselves. Then you close with Florida State at home. These are no easy games. Even Arkansas, for a team that's young and still trying to learn how to win, Nick, there's no real gimme, but I do think they're going to beat Arkansas, but I don't know that it's going to be pretty. They're competitive at least, and they haven't thrown in the towel. Their offense stunk in a recent loss to Mississippi State, but they only gave up 7 points. So, there's now on the other hand, I think if Florida wins that game and plays well, that may open up some possibilities down the road. We'll see. I mean, we'll see. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Florida is definitely a different team at home. I agree with you. I think before the year when we did those picks in June or July, whatever it was, Keith, I had Florida losing to Arkansas. I thought Arkansas would be better than they have been. But granted, they've played a tremendously tough schedule. And to what you said, to their credit, they've played it tough, even though they haven't come out on the winning end. So they've got a good quarterback. The interesting thing for Florida and for Florida's defense, I was just talking about Austin Armstrong. What will Arkansas look like offensively? You have no idea what the Razorbacks offense is going to look like that comes into town on Saturday. What are you preparing for? That'll be a big test for Austin Armstrong and for the Florida defensive staff. With Dan Enos, he's been a coach and an offensive coordinator for over a decade. You know what he runs, what he likes to do. And like you said, you fired your offensive coordinator and then had a full week to do an install specifically for Florida for one game to get ready for Florida. The second time this year, Florida's played somebody coming off of a bye. They are 1-0 playing teams coming off of a bye, but it's a really tough schedule. This is I said before the season started, Florida has to get wins early on in the schedule because they're going to be very hard to come by at the end. And they did that. You need one more win to get bowl eligibility. Bowl eligibility is huge. And listen, you'll make jokes. Not you, Keith, but fans will make jokes. You'll be pissed off because your rival fans will say, "Hey, enjoy the Duke's Mayo Bowl." DJ Lagway is going to be on campus and can practice with Florida for that.
Yeah.
You have a team full of redshirt sophomores, redshirt freshmen, and freshmen who need 15 more practices. Not just DJ Lagway, any of the guys that can enroll in early can practice and get a jump start. So, the Duke's Mayo Bowl, is it sexy? No. Don't tell their Twitter account I said this because they are vicious on Twitter, but it's important to get to a bowl game.
Nick, they didn't use the 15 practices last year, though, did they? They didn't have a chance, correct?
Yeah, no, they did not have a chance. They wanted to get away, and then the game, the season ends. Their bowl game was only 30 days after the season ended.
Yeah.
Not even. It was like December 20th was the game, and their season ended on November 25th.
Nathaniel Rogers has a question here, and throw my keys away. This offseason will be the most important thing for Billy Napier. Does he stay the same or does he make changes? What does your gut tell you, Nick? And they still got games to play. Who knows what's going to happen here? They could finish strong. People that are getting trashed on the message boards and in the Gator ether, your ecosystem right now, or whatever the right word is I'm looking for, may change some minds. We don't know what the future holds, obviously. But as of right now, what is your gut telling you, Nick?
Yeah, my gut is telling me that they'll make staff changes, and I think you'll see a shakeup in I think Billy will get a play caller. It's just a lot to do. When Steve Spurrier was coaching at Florida, you could recruit 3 months out of the year. There was no NIL. There was no transfer portal. You weren't having to recruit your roster over and over again. So when Steve Spurrier says, if you got your job because you were calling plays, don't give that up. There's way more you have to worry about and fend off and deal with as a head coach. And I think Billy Napier was hired because he's a builder, because he brings a great culture, and because he's going to recruit And Florida still needs that. I think that need is evidently shown on the field up there in Jacksonville. So I think when Billy talks about doing a long, hard look, and he asks all of his coaches to do it, and he does it as well, I think he will be better served, and the University of Florida will be better served if he has just a CEO role. And I think that you will get staff changes this offseason, and I think it'll be for the better.
All right, Graham Mertz had some interesting comments after the game where he basically said, look, kind of like it was the tone that sounded like was, what'd you guys expect? Look how young this team is. This is like you mentioned, Nick, there's so much youth on this team, and all these young guys are playing, and Georgia's really at the mountaintop. But nobody ever says that going into the game, obviously. You know what I mean? It's always after the game.
I said it.
I said
it going in. Yeah.
And most people out there. But,
yeah,
like we said, some people were sort of drinking the Kool-Aid. I mean, Dan Mullen, of all people, didn't he pick Florida? Chris Doering picked Florida. Now, obviously, Chris played at Florida, and maybe that influenced that in some way, not to try to impress anybody, but, hey, look, I'm buying in. But now they've got a big challenge. They've got to turn around and get that loss out of their head pretty quickly, Nick. And so what do you tell the team right now? What do you think the mood of the team is right now after that loss, which again, now it's got to be sort of another one of those wake-up calls. Like you go to Utah week 1, we're on national stage. We're going to show everybody, just watch, and you don't. All right. Mm-hmm. Then you regroup, you beat Tennessee, hell of a performance against Tennessee. And then you go up to Kentucky. All right, we got this thing figured out. And you just get the doors blown off you again. Then you sort of get things figured out again, and you finally win on the road, and then you face the biggest hurdle of all, Georgia. And it was really, sometimes they'll say it's a particular Saturday, Nick, is separation Saturday. In a way, this was separation Saturday. We saw the separation between the two programs.
It wasn't separating. It was just like putting the separation that we all knew, like on the pedestal.
Yeah, I took some heat on our board. I said, guys, somebody said, well, this is such a blowout that there's no chance the Florida's going to catch Georgia anytime in the near future. But each season's its own entity. Each game is its own entity within that larger entity. I've seen, and I brought up some old Gator teams, and they said, what does that have to do with today? What has everything to do with today, because it proves the 1982 team that we talked about earlier, Nick, that lost to Georgia 44-0. The next year they lost to Georgia by 1. The next year after that, they beat Georgia by 27. Turnarounds do happen. Young players do get better. Young players turn into superstars. Eugene Wilson. The other team maybe doesn't recruit at the same level. Now, Georgia, the recruiting rankings say Georgia is, but will there be the same amount of difference makers? They're going to lose Brock Bowers. I know he didn't play, but they're going to lose good players. Their offensive tackles that are so good. And Marius Mims, he's not going to be there forever. So, and then complacency potentially can set in with programs. So things do change. They do. But it just seems like it was it's just a humbling loss. So again, take us into Gator headquarters. What does this staff need to do to kind of get these guys their heads right? That had to be just a wow. Like players, Nick, and I'm going on, but they have a great ability to get these things out of their head pretty quickly, much faster than fans.
They're probably at Midtown before we were done writing last night, Keith.
Yeah, I did hear somebody called me today. They said, hey, I saw such and such at Total Wine last night, 3 hours after the game. So yes, they do move on. But deep down, they had to know, wow, we ain't there yet. We ain't there. And we're not even really close. That doesn't mean you can't get there. But what's the mood like in the building? And if you're Billy Napier, what are you doing to kind of get that fire into the team? Because this is a big game this week. This is the easiest one of the remaining games.
Yeah, I mean, the team's on the field now. They do like walkthrough install on Sunday nights. So they have meetings and then walkthrough install on Sunday. And they'll probably be eating dinner here soon. So it's tough because you have to spend 2 weeks, like I said earlier, telling the team, like, hey, our good's good enough. Our best is good enough. And then, well, shoot, I guess you just tell them, like, hey, that wasn't our best. But we only had 2 penalties. Like, you didn't have a ton of procedural things. Like, I think if you're going to be honest with yourself after that game, it's just like, listen, we're not there. The rosters aren't close. And to your point, what you were just saying, Keith, you don't have to out-recruit Georgia. Like, listen, this isn't a video game. You can't hit pause on what Georgia is doing while you catch up. You have to catch up in real time, but you don't have to have a better roster. You just have to have a roster that's close. And Florida doesn't have that yet. You have to continue not only getting NFL bodies in high school players like an LJ McCray, like DJ Lagway, but you have to, like you did for McCray, beat out Georgia for them. And not like you like to say all the time, and you know better than I do in recruiting, Keith, not those, well, you beat out Georgia for him, but was he really a Georgia take? Like LJ McCray's a guy that Georgia wants on their roster. That's the kind of guy you need to beat out Georgia for. So like,
I had somebody text me after the game, a Georgia person, and they said, "Hey, we'll trade you Brock Vandegrift for LJ McCray." So look, what do you say? Daniel says, "Hey, well, LJ McCray, speaking of which, 5-star defensive end / edge. We got to keep pointing out Florida recruited him to play edge. Will he be enrolling early? Yes, he will be." And so that's significant. He could take part in bowl practices. Obviously, they can't hit. I don't think the guys that get there that are just enrolling, I think they can wear contact jerseys, but they get to be a part of the program early. They get to see how practice goes. And then he gets there for real in the spring. And then you find out what you have. Sometimes these guys just aren't ready to be major contributors in year one, particularly on the offensive and defensive line, where the learning curve is enormous, and the effort level to succeed on the defensive line in the SEC is incredible. And that's why, Nick, you want like 8 to 10 guys rotating, because a guy can't give you 70 good plays. He can't. He can't. He won't have the energy. He's getting hit by 2 or 3 guys every play. What you want is 20, 25 snaps per guy, really good snaps. So I expect LJ McCray is going to be a contributor next year. Gets there, again, he's going to enroll in January. He can take part in bowl practices. We'll have to see if he gets there or not. All right, Nick, we got a lot of comments here. 5 practices in a bowl game while Miami and FSU are cleaning up in the portal, talking about last year. There's a lot of upset.
Nathaniel said this too, and we get this a ton. It's not Florida's decision to not play in the bowl game. You got to understand how the world works. ESPN owns I think it was 63 bowls, and ESPN owns 59 of them. They pay a lot of money to put the bowls on. They pay all of these conferences a lot of money. It's not Florida's decision to not play in a bowl game. Daddy ESPN will let you know if you can skip the bowl game. And unless it's like COVID, when you didn't have enough people and we literally cannot field a football team, you're playing in the bowl game whether you like it or not. It's not Florida's decision. I know a lot of fans were mad about getting beat by Oregon State, and we didn't want to be there, and we shouldn't have played. It's not your decision.
Yeah. Nick, we got a question here or a comment. Somebody says, Mayaka Gator, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, says it's always next year, Keith. It's nauseating at this point. Next year has been around since 2010. Is that an accurate statement, Nick? Has it been, I've been gone for a while. Has it kind of been like that? The Florida fans, are they justifiably upset about where things are right now?
No.
Or yes and no?
Upset to be where they are right now. Yes.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't always, I certainly haven't. And my guy there, my baseball guy there will let you know. I haven't been telling you, I didn't tell you Florida was going to be good in 2014 or 15. I thought they'd be good in 17, but no, it's not. It's always next year. Florida's had some good teams, but also Florida's had a football team for what? I think this is season 116, something like that. And they've had 30 good years in those 116, and 2 really, really good coaches.
I'd say there's more than 30 good years, but that's. But 2 really good coaches. I mean,
2 national championship coaches. That's the standard.
Well, so 2 national championship coaches. But Nick,
Charlie Pell, Ray Graves has success. Are they great coaches? If the fan right now, if their expectation is championships, then you've had 2 good coaches.
The expectations were a little different in different eras. To be quite frank,
but
Florida didn't have the resources. Florida was a state in the early days. Where, first of all, the Big Ten for years was the best conference. All right. Florida was a state that was like the Wild West. It was uninhabitable for centuries. Okay.
It still is uninhabitable. AC. AC goes out, you got to go.
There weren't huge metropolitan areas 100 years ago in the state of Florida. So Florida got a late start behind other schools in the SEC. So they're in a tough spot, but look, they are recruiting fairly well. The question is, Nick, how many classes in a row does it take to get to that upper echelon, right? And also, so if you're a Florida fan right now, you also have to believe as a program, you're going to recruit at a high level. You're going to get the players. Okay, do we have the right people to get the good players? It looks like you do. Once they get them, is this the right group to coach them and take Florida to the next level? That's what we don't know. You'd like to think so. But it's a leap of faith. It's a leap of faith. There's not a proof of concept at a major program for these guys. There's just not. For some of the assistants, sure, or well, really all of them as assistants, but as a head coach in charge of a program, Billy, what he did at Louisiana was very impressive, but it wasn't NC State. It wasn't a Power 5 school stepping stone job to Florida. So the fans are sort of like, okay, he's going to get us the players, I think, but then what are they going to do when they get with him? I think that's the concern of coaches right now. And like I said, it is a leap of faith with the fans right now. And they're tired of leaps of faith. They're tired of, I think, of staff saying, trust us. And that's not Billy Napier's fault. That's because it's been hit in their head by the last few staffs. The last staff, Nick, didn't they say, trust us, trust our recruiting evaluations? We know what we're doing.
I think, well, no, they just rather to not talk about recruiting, Keith.
Yeah. These guys, this staff is actually out there recruiting. Okay. And they do need better players. I mean, you can question play calls. You can question preparation. By the way, Nick, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. Another special teams miscue yesterday where there was a block punt that ended up being a safety. You can question all that, and they know that. But what you can't question is when you look at the roster and you say, they just don't have the guys that Georgia, Alabama, and some of these other schools do. Now, you could say they should have done maybe better in the portal, and that stuff. That there are certain criticisms that are quite valid, quite frankly, and they know that. The guys over at Gators headquarters, they know that. They're in charge. Billy's in charge of the program. He knows they don't walk on water. But the question is, again, or a question, can they keep recruiting like this? How long is it reasonably going to take? Because next year's schedule is really tough. All right. So if you say you're young again next year, it's not going to fly. It's not. Nobody's going to care that you're going to have a hard schedule, Nick. They don't care anymore. Nobody's going to care that the roster will still be somewhat young next year, and you're going to have an influx of all these freshmen, right? Nick left us for a second here. People at a certain point, they don't necessarily care whether it's rational to think that or not. They want results, right? All of you want results. All right, let's get to some questions here. We'll see if we can get Nick back. Nathaniel says, we need to figure out how we can turn ourselves into the most exotic school in the South. I think that, look, the recruiting is fine. It's now turning those recruits, developing them into Power 5 standouts, right? So in this current class, Nick just messaged me, says his internet's kind of crapping out. He's going to try to get back. I think we're coming back right now. Add to stage. And there's Nick. Nick, I was just saying, when you look at Florida's recruiting, there are some potential difference makers in this class. And that's what you need. Eugene Wilson, difference maker. You get 4 or 5 guys like that on your team, and that can kind of lift your team up, quite frankly. That can lift the rest of your team up. The Danny Werfel types. Now, they don't come along every day. So, again, keep recruiting at a high level, but you've got to produce wins at some point. I don't know that if Florida's sitting at 4-4 next year, that's gonna fly. I just don't see how that's gonna fly. That's year 3. Oh, Daddy's got a question. He's mad we haven't answered. He asked our thoughts on Jeff Scott and Clemson. I think. And here's your question. We need an OC. I'd like Jeff Scott from Clemson. I think Jeff's an analyst up at Clemson right now.
No, he's out. He and his family did move back up to Clemson, South Carolina, but he's not an analyst. He's not coaching. He's not even part of the program this year. Well, he's collecting checks from USF, but he's not part of the program.
We talked to, obviously, Nick, you and I have some ties to Jeff, and for people that don't know, and I knew last year I think he had a chance to go to Florida in some capacity and chose not to. I think the stress of being a head coach and it not working out, and it did not work for him in Tampa. And he really took a beating in the press and on social media.
I'm asking right now. I just don't know how much did he play call at Clemson when he was there? How much did he play call at USF? So I'm asking my buddy who covers
I
USF
believe
if
he was
calling plays.
Sorry, he was co-OC at Clemson with Tony. Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Virginia's head coach. Help me out here, somebody.
Somebody.
Virginia, hold on. I'm going to find this out. But they were
Tony Elliott.
They were golly. They were co-OCs, but it was my understanding that Tony Elliott called the plays.
Yeah.
At Clemson.
So like that's a thing too, and then is how much experience does Jeff Scott have as a play caller? Is it going to just be, hey, listen, Jeff and I are buddies. We go way back. Jeff, here's my playbook. Call my plays. Or is it going to be a complete different offense? Like, are you just saying Jeff Scott because you know that name? Or do you love what Jeff Scott has done offensively? Or do you think it's just going to be Billy's plays with somebody else calling them? So I understand the Jeff Scott, like there's a history there. They know each other. They've worked together. But I don't know what Jeff Scott is as a play caller, or if he even called plays when he was the head coach at USF or at Clemson.
All right, well, let me ask you this. When you assess the season, Nick, and we're by the way, Keith Niebuhr, Nick Delatorre, Gators Online. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, right now, Gators Online, $1 for 1 month of all the best University of Florida sports coverage and intel. But Nick, if you look at the games that Florida's lost this year, how many of them were because of play calling, and how many of them were because the other team had more talent? That's a fair question. That's a question that, as a staff and as a head coach, he has to go back. Billy has to go back and assess that. And in his final assessment, he may say, my play calls and the play calls of our offensive staff were not the reason Florida lost these games. Now, I'm not saying they are. I'm saying they have to assess that, and they very well may make the assessment that that is not why they lost those games and that they need to stay the course. I'm just saying, I think
Utah's a better roster. I think Georgia, obviously, the game plan you had to try to beat Kentucky was terrible. You beat yourself by taking that game plan up to Lexington before you even boarded the plane. So to me, I would probably say two. If we were asking me, I'd say probably two of the losses were, hey, you just lost to a better team. Like, I don't know that Kentucky's a better roster than Florida. I don't think Kentucky has more talent than Florida. I just think you went up there with a terrible game plan.
Yeah. Interesting comment here from Jim Martin. And again, we're just going to go for a couple more minutes. Nick's got to get some Downton Abbey reruns to watch, I think. But Jim says, hey, expecting this year's recruiting class to produce results against next year's schedule is reaching. Being competitive while these players continue to grow is the reality. Patience, that word again. Very good point. You've got to kind of slowly work these guys in. Remember, you're recruiting here with high school guys and here with portal guys, right?
Oh, and then recruiting your own roster because other schools are talking to them and they want to leave.
Doing quite well. I'm not going to give this recruiting class an A, though. I just don't think there's enough on the O-line and the D-line, but it's a very good class. I don't care what the rankings say. I'm looking at the reality, what they needed and what they did. Very good class. Just not great. And not yet. Could finish that way. But, how many of those guys are going to be, a lot of them may play next year, but how many of them are going to be big contributors next year? And so if a lot of them are major contributors, then here you are, you're young again, all over again. And again, I don't know that I think you can use the youth excuse this year because it's not really an excuse. It's a legitimate thing. I think if you're a staff and you start digging into that next year, I don't think people are going to accept it, Nick. I just don't. And whether that's fair or not, this is the age in which we live where people expect quicker results because of the portal. So now what you do is you go out and you try to hit a home run in the portal. And obviously they're going to try to, and bring in 4 or 5 difference maker type guys. Well, maybe not difference makers, but guys that can fill in keyholes. They've got to get better on the offensive line. They're going to have to continue to get better on the defensive line. Maybe another linebacker. You're losing Ricky Pearsall. You've got to figure out that. Are the guys you have returning, can they step up, or do you have to go out and find somebody elite to replace him? So there is some work to be done in the portal without question. They're going to leave plenty of spots for that. But there's no reason to think Florida shouldn't make strides next year. But again, you're playing Miami, you're playing FSU, you're playing at Texas, you're playing UCF. It'll be the damn Super Bowl for them again. You've got a very tough schedule, but that's what you signed up for. End of story. That's it. That's what you signed up for. And so, they're going to have to figure that out. But I do think, Nick, they have, based on what I've read from you and Zach Albaverdi, they seem to have some confidence that this young roster has some guys that are really going to turn into outstanding players. But Eugene Wilson can't be the only quote-unquote difference maker. Some other guys are going to have to take big leaps, particularly on the offensive and defensive lines. I mean, would you agree with that?
The tough
I mean,
part
big league.
is the tough part is the offensive tackles that you're looking for aren't in the portal. Those 5-star guys that commit to Georgia and Alabama and USC and Texas, they don't go in the portal. They're 5 stars. They play a little bit as a freshman, or they start as a freshman. They play as sophomores. They play as juniors, and then they go to the NFL. Like, there's not a lot of those types of offensive linemen. So then you can get a guy like Micah Mazuka or get some pieces for in the interior, but you're not really finding elite. You're shopping at Dollar General typically in the portal for offensive tackles. You're not shopping at Neiman Marcus for offensive tackles in the portal.
Nick, let me ask you this. You've got a lot of these, correct me if I'm wrong, aren't a lot of these offensive linemen, couldn't they come back next year?
Florida's going to lose, realistically, outside of the guys who are seniors, they're going to lose Ricky Pearsall and Princely Umealin to the draft. They're going to lose like Xanders. I think you're going to have some guys have to go into the portal because Florida has to get guys out. They have too many guys on scholarship. They can't sign their class right now.
If most of these offensive linemen are coming back and you expect people to make a jump year to year, do you stick with that? Or do you say,
I mean,
that's a roll of the dice if you stick with this group. I hate to say it, but
some people will tell you, listen, I don't care if you bring 5 bad players back. They're still bad. Well, don't tell me about experience. I don't think Florida's necessarily bad there. They can definitely upgrade. But what I was trying to say is, like, at tackle, you're not getting that quick fix, or it's going to be very rare to get that quick fix. You're going to have to rely on great evaluations and signing somebody, or hoping that one of the tackles you signed, maybe a Cam Waits, makes a huge jump, or one of the guys you signed in the past 2 classes can make a huge jump and start at tackle. But like, I think Austin Barber comes back. Like, I don't know what Austin Barber's draft grade looks like. Probably 4th round or lower.
Oh, I would think so. But now, so if you bring all these guys back, because right now I think we can all agree this isn't an offensive line that's among the 10 best in the SEC. Right? I don't think there's any question.
Sure. Better than South Carolina's.
If they all improve, how much would they have to improve for Florida just to get in the top half of the SEC? That's the question. To me, that's why you got to go out and get guys. I mean, you just have to. You have to. There's no question about it. And Barber was Barber was better at right tackle than at left tackle. That's a hard transition. He's a good player. That's just a hard transition. All right, Jim says we definitely need to hit the lottery in the portal. I think that's right. Fighting Gators says, I think by DJ Lagway's 2nd year, we should be competing with the better teams like Georgia. I think that's the expectation. They better be. But the question is, how competitive are you next year? Because if you're not competitive next year, you don't probably get a 4th year. I think they have to know that.
No, I think
because
also I look at the 24 schedule. It looks really bad on paper, but like Miami's out their starting quarterback, Florida State's out their starting quarterback. When you really dig into it, like, hey, these current rosters, what we know of them, they're going to be a way different. Now, the portal changes everything. You could have, Miami can go and get 12 guys in the portal if Life Wallet stock ticks up a little bit. But like, on paper, the names look really daunting. But I think when we dig into what those rosters are actually going to look like, they're not going to be what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, things change, obviously. And we don't know. I mean, some of but also there's a flip side of that, Nick. Some of the teams that you're looking at as wins next year can get better. I mean, it works both ways,
Yeah.
There's some questions about Florida's offensive line recruiting. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll let everybody get out of here. The bottom line is Florida's offensive line recruiting has been awful, even when their overall classes have been good. Even the 24 class, the worst rated players are the offensive line commits. All right, you look at Florida's got 4 offensive linemen committed right now. 2 of them are 4 stars, Fletcher Westfall and Marcus Maskell. The other 2, Mike Williams and Noah Porter-Jean, are 3 stars. They need that one elite guy. Now, Fletcher Westfall could be that. Marcus Maskell could be that. They are very high ceiling type guys, Florida thinks, and so do rankings people. We'll see. But again, the question is, that's great. But usually, how many winter tackles ready to compete? When is a 4-star tackle ready to move into a starting lineup? Year 2 at the fastest, most of the time, right?
Like, that's the express lane, like redshirt sophomore, junior, redshirt junior.
That's right. So those guys aren't going to be those 4 offensive linemen, whether you like them or not like them. The chances we see them play next year are probably down towards 0%. But here is a question. Would Jordan Seaton, 5-star offensive tackle, considering Florida, would he start if he comes to UF? I don't know.
I don't ever say that. Like, you'll never catch me say a freshman, and you could be the number 1 tackle in the country. I don't know if I'll ever say, yep, that freshman offensive lineman will start in college right away.
Yeah,
I don't think I'll ever say that.
Yeah, and I saw photos of him, and I've been next to him. He's a fine player. I mean, he's really good. He's got to work on his body some. He's got great feet. He's strong, but he's got to work on his body. He doesn't look like, oh gosh, I'm just trying to think. I don't know that I'm just trying to, Cyrus Quandra. I mean, there's been some great offensive tackles the last 10 years. I don't know body-wise that he's that. So he probably would need some work there, but he's a talented guy. Again, I think if you're going to get a starter from this cycle, it's going to be through the portal, quite frankly. Now, could he be in the 2 deep? Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, he's not redshirting.
Yeah.
He's not redshirting.
First of all, you got to land him.
Yeah.
When you're recruiting offensive linemen, you really got to. Yeah, that's a good one. When you're recruiting, but there's not very many Alex Leatherwoods, and quite frankly,
that's why I popped that one up, because Alex Leatherwood was like, how many offensive linemen are signed every year? Multiply that by how long ago Alex Leatherwood was, and I'm sure we could find more guys that went somewhere and started. And Alex Leatherwood was, I think, starting like right tackle for Alabama as a freshman in Bama's heyday. But like, that's an outlier. And it's easy to remember an outlier because they're an outlier. For the most part, I don't know how many, or if anyone that I would point at and be like, that guy is going to start at left tackle for wherever he goes as a freshman.
Nick,
it's such a projection on the line.
That's right. I'm just trying to think. Jim's just saying. I'm just saying it could happen.
Yeah.
Looks like maybe.
Jim's in here every Sunday with us, Keith, and is always very positive.
He is. Now the question again. So he'd have to be really ready. But generally, when a true freshman offensive lineman's starting, that means you've got deficiencies on your offensive line, and Florida does. So that part of it is fairly accurate. But I think I can't remember too many freshman tackles that have started in my lifetime at the University of Florida. 2 of them started in 1992, Nick. Reggie Green on the right side, Jason Odom on the left side. Odom ended up being an All-American and an NFL player. Green was just a kind of a good college player. But they started because Nick, Florida had nothing else. They had nothing else. So maybe, Jawan Taylor, Daddy Gator says, did he start as a true freshman, Nick?
I can't remember if Wani.
There's not many. The point is, it's not many. So with offensive line recruiting, you want to recruit a couple years out. Okay, so last year's recruiting class, Florida signed some good dudes, Rod Kearney and Najee Harris, right? Now, both those guys are going to see increased roles next year. That should help the offensive line, right? It's just, if you're expecting true freshman offensive line to come in and play, aside from maybe one guy, if he's truly elite, you're asking for trouble, okay? So they're going to have to, the offensive line, they're going to have to go out and win in the portal. And by the way, last year's defensive line class, which was special, has had an okay impact this year, but they're not dominating out there, Nick. None of those freshman defensive linemen. It's a hard transition on the interior. It is. Okay.
Yeah. I think Jamari Lyons is a guy that we might see make a jump next year. Really wasn't healthy as a freshman. Almost like a freshman season for him right now. He's a guy who on the interior, I don't know that he's special, but I think he can be a very good college player. I think TJ Searcy and Kelby Collins have the potential to be special.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Nick, those guys, if they make big leaps, then the offensive line, then the defensive line could take a big jump next year. So yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. JR says, losing the 2 offensive linemen to Southern Cal really hurt this team more than it was given credit for. Well, that's true. You also had a transfer come down that was going to start, and he had to leave the program due to a health issue in his family. So yes, there's been some bad luck, but why didn't those guys stay in the program? Why are they not here? The 2 that went to Southern Cal. There's it's just one of those things. I mean, they've got to figure it out there. We're not the ones getting paid to figure it out. They're the ones making a lot of money to figure this out.
I think Michael Tarquin lost his starting job over there at USC.
Yeah, the other one never played there. Ethan White.
Yeah,
correct?
Ethan White had a bunch of stuff, personal stuff off the
But
field.
they were solid players at Florida, so it's tricky. So, all right, I think that is probably it. We appreciate all the questions. Nick, you good to go? You ready to head out of here, watch some football?
Yeah, I gotta go watch Sunday Night Football or Bridgerton. One of the two.
We just wanted everybody to be able to vent a little bit. It was a tough loss, obviously. The future is always bright. There's always something positive coming. That's the history of Gator football. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button, subscribe button, leave a comment. Also, right now, Gators Online, $1 for 1 month. Great team insight and intel from Nick Delatorre and Zach Albaverdi. And then also we've got great recruiting coverage, we think. Myself and Corey Bender, we got a great team of 4. And we also have one of the best message board communities in the country. The site's really taken off and growing fast. So we appreciate everybody watching the show. That is it for Nick Delatorre. I am Keith Niebuhr. This is Talking Gators. We'll do it again soon. Have a good week. Take a step back from the ledge. Have a cold drink. It's going to get better. Y'all take care.